This is the conclusion to a long-form breakdown of the Drumhead. You'll need to watch from the very beginning for it to make any sense. Check in the description or top right-hand corner. The rest of this analysis of the TNG episode The Drumhead will be on something that seems similar, but really isn't. While we have discussed the mad witch hunt going on by Sati, perhaps the most terrifying piece of her madness is the last act of the episode. Sati finally turns her sights on Picard, not because he's done anything wrong, not because of any evidence, but because he stands against her attempts to bypass the law in her misguided form of justice. In the last act of the episode, Tarsus is largely forgotten as Picard becomes the main target of Sati's ire. As has been stated, Jean-Luc had had enough of Sati's attempt to destroy someone for her own holy war. He tells her that he will stop her at all costs. The unfortunate thing about saying that is that sometimes there is a cost you will have to pay. The cost for Jean-Luc would be that she turns the investigation solely upon him. This is something that is so telling of a culture that wants to either be a victim or punish someone. Again, I could give you several examples of people and YouTubers like Sid Alpha that will stand up for a right or a belief. Not that they even like what they are defending, just that they know something has a right to exist, this giving protections to other things that should exist. And for that, they are attacked. It honestly amazes me how timeless this episode is when you take a look at what happens to Picard. Back to the episode at hand, the captain is challenged and brought on trial. Oh, sorry, they called it committee this time. It's hard to tell if it's a hearing, trial, or committee. And can I just take a moment to give kudos to Sati for the bravado she has got to have in bringing the captain of Starfleet's flagship up on charges? But man, I know that Picard is pretty easygoing. However, I don't think he's someone I'd want to exactly challenge unless I knew what I was doing given his influence. As the hearing begins, Picard requests to make a statement, and of course, Sati attempts to shut him down. The captain counters her by quoting the Code of Uniform Justice, and thus will be able to make a statement, which, again, only continues to confirm Starfleet is more and more considering itself a military. I'm not understanding why they continue to jump between what can happen at a civilian court and then trying to have a military hearing. Though, if I'm being fair, I wouldn't be able to write accurately how a military court works either. I'd have to hire someone who has actually been in the military, which they may not have been able to do. With his rights under the Uniform Code clear, Picard discusses everything that has transpired. Now, many people will quote the "with every link the chain is forged" speech that comes after this one. And it's really good, don't get me wrong, but I think this speech that he does right here is probably the best of the episode. He completely lays out the events that have been discussed and how everything has gone from a legitimate investigation to a witch hunt. If I was writing it, the only possible inclusion I wish he had discussed was how dangerous this can be. Now I know, repetitive, but Sati has put the Federation even more in danger than when she started. She is now chasing shadows, phantoms. She's crying wolf way too much. This is dangerous because when she does actually find a threat, who's going to listen to her? In today's age, people we think are guilty are overanalyzed and everything they do is questioned, which basically makes everyone numb to when they actually have committed a crime. I mean, and I'm just throwing this out there, can you think of a potentially high-profile figure that if he misspells something like, let's say, coverage, it is covered by the mainstream media for days? It's so bad that if that person was actually a criminal, the news has called him it so much that no one will believe them if it's ever proven. But back to the speech, Picard goes on to discuss how the entire trial of Tarsus was baseless. He asks Sati to stop, and of course, the Admiral is already too deep in. She can't even hear reason at this point. She then goes to do something predictable but no less scary. She begins to question Picard on his breaking of the Prime Directive. And by the by, of anyone to question if they don't follow the main religion of the Federation, Picard would not be it, lady. Just trust me on that one. However, my warnings aside, Sati would question him on his faith, on his patriotism. But you know, I think what is lost in translation with a lot of people on this action is that Sati is going after Picard for anything that he has done wrong. Not even related to there being a spy. But that's exactly how it goes, isn't it? When we can't tie a person to the crime or other person we hate, we simply attack their record. And the sad thing is, there isn't a person alive who hasn't done something aberrant, something unforgivable. So if we don't like a person, think they're a hypocrite, find them unworthy, or want to delegitimize them, we begin scouring their history and looking for reasons not to like them. We find whatever we need to discredit them and bring it up, whether it's been done days ago, years, or even decades. And it doesn't matter if they've atoned. Oh no, if they did it, that's end game. And that's exactly what happens with Picard. He explained everything that happened. He can't be held accountable for what he did, but none of it mattered. We'll get more into that after this. As we discussed, Sati would challenge Picard on his record of the Prime Directive, on his affiliations with choosing to save the Enterprise over capturing a Romulan spy, and placing the deaths of everyone at Wolf 359 on him for being Locutus, all because he disagreed with her. She now makes him look like a traitor, and with all this brought before him, we get the coveted speech known by all. It's always curious to me to search this speech up on YouTube. Regardless of what people believe, they think it applies to those they disagree with. I've seen it as a response to conservatives, response to liberals, response to SJWs, response to feminists and anti-feminists. It's interesting how all of this is painted against those who are thought to be the bad guys. And let's take a look at the speech. With the first link, the chain is forged. The first speech censored, the first thought forbidden, the first freedom denied, chains us all irrevocably. The first time any man's freedom is trodden on, we're all damaged. We all know how this ends. Sati is thrown into a frenzy with her father's words used against her and ultimately loses all legitimacy with a warning from Picard to Worf that they must always look out for her stripe. So I'm not going to be going into that any further. I'm going to be looking at the speech. And unfortunately, this speech, when I was doing my research, can not only be applied today, but be applied 50 years ago. The problem with the speech, with wanting to stop the first chain from being forged, is that it's highly unpopular. The first chain that is forged is usually based on an evil person using their freedoms to hurt the sensibilities of others. While in the episode it was talking about a Romulan spy and then ultimately attacking an innocent man like Tarsus, in real life we need look no further than Europe for an example of this. For instance, to ensure Godwin becomes a part of the discussion, let's consider the Nazi regime. The Nazis were one of the worst aspects of humanity. Hitler and those within his inner circle were probably among the worst human beings on planet Earth. After so much death and destruction, including both the Holocaust and World War II, it would be natural for anyone to not want someone to proclaim how great the Nazis are. Anything that promoted Nazis, especially after the war, would be extremely hurtful and concerning. So by that logic, it makes sense to want to curtail that. However, to tell someone who inaccurately states that Hitler was right that they can't, and again, let me clarify, not a call to action, not to kill people, just to say that Hitler was right, by telling them they can't say that, it's a forging of the chain. And then, that chain continues. It continues to be formed and forged, until we now have where, in the United Kingdom and other places, police departments will arrest you for tweets, even innocuous ones, or for teaching your pug to do a Nazi salute. The point of this breakdown was to analyze the science fiction that we love and to try to bring it into the real world a bit. I honestly think, whether the writers meant to or not, we're talking about situations where we're trying to limit speech, where the chain is being forged. I do think it's a balancing act. I don't think that all speech can be allowed. Again, calls to action, to kill someone or harm someone, shouldn't be allowed. But we have to be careful. It is a thin line where we go from legitimately wanting to defend what we hold dear to stop anyone who would want to cause us harm, to attacking the innocent. You know, while rereading this script, the one I'm reading to you right now, I don't know that I'll ever be this blunt again, but I did want to try something new. The Drumhead was one of the best episodes that I think speaks to our culture today. It really is a warning to always be vigilant. But now that I've finished it, be sure to stay tuned for the next long-form series.